Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello and welcome to episode 912 with Kirstin Ferguson. Kirstin has some excellent perspective on how to lead well in modern times, blending both head and heart to have great results and impact and connection with your team. So you'll learn 1, why traditional leadership is lacking and what you should do instead. 2, why you may not be as self-aware as you think. And 3, why you might want to talk less in your next meeting. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP912. And if you're at awesomeatyourjob.com, I recommend you check out some goodies such as the Gold Nugget email list, which gives you summary wisdom and insight from each guest as the episode comes out, and then unlocks the whole archive of 912 of these summaries. We call those the Gold Nuggets over at awesomeatyourjob.com. Now, here's a bit about Kirstin. Dr. Kirstin Ferguson, PhD, is an award-winning leadership expert, best-selling author, columnist, and keynote speaker. Kirstin has been called Australia's own Brene Brown and has been named one of the world's top 30 thinkers to watch by Thinkers 50. Her latest book, Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership, has been named one of the top 10 best new management books in the world in 2023. Now, here's Kirstin. Kirstin, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Hello, it's fabulous to be here.
Well, I'm excited to hear about some of the wisdom you have for us from your book, Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership. But first, I need to hear a little bit about your time with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And most top of mind is, what was your involvement with Bluey?
Every Australian likes to claim that Bluey is somehow connected to them, but I have 2 connections with Bluey. It's made in my hometown where I live in Brisbane and produced there, and I was on the ABC board when we commissioned it. So, but I can't claim any responsibility for that, but it's fabulous, isn't it? Have you got young children?
It really is, yes. I've got kids 5, 4, and 1.
Yeah.
And Bluey, wow, it's maybe the top thing.
Yeah.
In terms, I think Daniel Tiger, in my own opinion, for whatever it's worth, Daniel Tiger is very strong in terms of enriching. But Bluey, I think, is just about as enriching, but so much more entertaining.
Yeah, they've done so well to make it entertaining for adults to watch as well. My children are now not children, they're 23 and 21. And I can tell you, I wish we'd had Bluey on repeat rather than the Wiggles endlessly. I love the Wiggles, of course, another Australian children's export. But yeah, there's only so many times you can listen to their songs.
Well, and so you were on the committee that commissioned it. And I'm curious, when it comes to creative works, it's like, do you know if you have a hit on your hands or do you not? Like, people have famously passed on the Beatles and other smash hits in terms of, culture and creativity. And so, but what was the vibe like? Let's give this a shot. Some Blue Dogs? Can't hurt.
Well, I mean, this is where I can't claim any credit. The board is a long way from those kind of commissioning discussions. And I remember at the time, our head of television, who's now the managing director or the CEO of the whole of the ABC, quite deservedly so, I remember he said to me, hey, I've just commissioned this show about a dog called Bluey. And he said it's going to be a massive hit. So I think the people who know. And he certainly said that before anyone had seen it, and he was right. So I don't know. Whether I could have had the same skill, I'm not so sure.
Okay. Well, Kirstin, I'm now going to force a segue. I think Bluey does a fine job of engaging the head and the heart. And I'd love to hear, with your book, any particularly surprising or counterintuitive discoveries you've made as you're learning and researching and putting it together.
Yeah, and I think, your podcast is fabulous because it's all about helping people to be awesome at their job, obviously. And what I really hope people take away from our conversation is that delivering whatever your job is, in inverted commas, your job description and the outputs and the KPIs and all those sorts of things, obviously incredibly important to retain a job. But to be truly successful, you have to be able to balance that ability to deliver, and that is sort of encompassed by leading with the head, and we can go through what that looks like, but with leading with the heart. And I think people sometimes forget that. And that's because as leaders, and let me say, we are all leaders. It doesn't matter where you are in the org chart, you are leading in your families, in your communities, and in your role. So it doesn't matter who's listening right now. I'm telling you, you're a leader because you're impacting those around you through the words you use, the choices you make, and the behaviors that you role model. And so I think leading with the heart, which is around humility and empathy, self-awareness and things, has to be balanced with all those technical capabilities to be awesome at your job.
Okay, certainly. And so then, are there some folks who just totally don't have it in their head that they're a leader or that they need to lead with their head or their heart? What are you seeing as sort of the antithesis of that message or that experience?
I think anyone who thinks they know everything and is the smartest person in the room, we all know those people, they're a challenge because they're the kinds of leaders, and we all work with them, who aren't interested in diverse points of view. They're not interested in feedback. They're not interested in a different way of doing things. And I think those kind of leaders are not the modern leaders that we need in the workplace today. So if you've got a leader like that, that's going to be really challenging. But don't be that leader yourself. So it's really easy to identify who those people are, but it's much harder for us to look in the mirror and think, actually, am I doing some of that myself? And is my leadership style still fit for purpose?
Okay, so you mentioned modern leaders, and that's also in the subtitle. Would you contrast that with traditional or old school leaders?
Dinosaurs, I tend to call them.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not too bad. But my mission is to rid the world of dinosaurs, and that pretty well covers most.
Okay, understood. So that's the mission. So then could you maybe paint a picture for what does a dinosaur or old school traditional leadership look, sound, feel like that you're saying is not what we need right now?
Oh, my goodness. I reckon everyone listening has someone in their mind who doesn't believe in remote working. They think if you're not right in front of them, you're not working, you're just relaxing at home somehow watching television. They don't believe in doing things differently. Everything's done the same way. They're not interested in feedback, as I said. They're really just there to tell you what to do and to make sure we deliver on the KPIs for the organisation. And that's really, work is a task to be done rather than a way to sort of be as humans. And I think you can't separate who we are when we come to work. We have lives, we have issues we're dealing with, we've got all sorts of challenges. And I think modern leaders actually understand that and factor that into their leadership.
Okay, understood. So that's a view of the dinosaurs. And then when you talk about head versus heart, I'd love to hear how you think about this in terms of, it sounds like it's sort of a both and approach.
Absolutely.
As opposed to all head or all heart. And how do you think about, I don't know if the word is balance or both of this or simultaneous, but at the same time, but what's a view for too much of one versus too much of the other?
I think we all know individuals like that. And you're right, being all heart is just as unhelpful as being all head. So we would know, or people might know, leaders who run a not-for-profit organisation or really great causes, but they're all about how they can benefit people, which is wonderful, but they don't think about the strategy for how they're going to get there, how they're going to fund it, all of those kinds of things. That's as unhelpful in leaders as the CFO, and I always pick on the poor old CFO, but who's just focused on balance sheets and not thinking about how their decisions are impacting others. So it is about balance. And the art of modern leadership that I write about is knowing what is needed and when. And I guess I feel I've been really fortunate because I've been a leader myself for 30 years, started in the military, went through, as you heard, I sat on company boards, I've been a CEO, but I've also got a PhD in leadership. So not only was it important to me to write this book based on research, it also was a sort of a counterpoint to some of the anecdotal leadership books you get, which are all very interesting. But, I want to know, how do you know that? And what's the data point to show that? And that's how I came up with, obviously it's a metaphor, the head and heart, but 4 attributes of leading with the head and 4 of leading with the heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fun. As we're chatting, I just finished listening to the Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk. And well, there's some head there.
Yeah. I went and heard Walter recently, just a week ago in LA. Fantastic.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, talking about the book.
Well, yeah, it was riveting. It was 20 hours and I was like, wow, am I done already? I wish it were longer. But so there are these periods of, I guess, what he would call being ultra hardcore and having a surge and saying, this thing needs to happen by this time or everybody's fired. Now, that sounds super head and minimal heart. I'm curious, is there a place for that ultra hardcore? And how do you play that game?
Look, I don't think so, because there's always repercussions for behaving in that way. When things are steadier, you're going to have people around you that don't know when you're next going to decide that it's time to be ultra hardcore. There's obviously times when there's a crisis, for example, and your leadership needs to change. And you, as a leader, may have once been very consultative and taken the time to get everyone's feedback, and suddenly that is not a priority. You actually, as a leader, need to step up then and make some decisions, and perhaps have just a very small core group around you. It doesn't mean, though, that you need to lose your humanity. So decisions still have impacts on people, regardless of whether or not you're making them in a crisis or whether you are doing them because you want to save money because you've just bought a new company. I think we must, as leaders, be thinking about what the impact is beyond ourselves. And yes, in a crisis, the consequences may be weighed up differently, but it doesn't take away from our need to be human.
Okay. Well, so you've got a number of attributes associated with being a great head leader and a great heart leader. Could you share those attributes and maybe a pro tip or best practice for doing that well in practice?
Yeah. So the 4 attributes of leading with the head, this is all the tangible stuff we've been rewarded for at school and been promoted and that we feel really comfortable in. So they won't be too much of a surprise. There's curiosity. Most people love curiosity, but it's scary to think that while the research shows 92% of us value it, only 24% of us get to feel curious at work. So that's a real challenge for leaders. The second attribute is capability, and that's all about how we feel capable in our jobs. We're not just capable, but, how we actually believe we can do things, and that we know that making mistakes is all just part of the learning process. The third one is wisdom, and that's all about decision making and how we gather data and evidence to make really good decisions. And the last one, which is the most important actually of all 8, is called perspective. And that's about, in basic terms, how to read a room and really bring in the signals that you're seeing, understanding the environment, the context that you're leading in. And it also means that you can see who's missing from the room, which is incredibly important. And it's highly correlated with empathy, because it means you can put yourself in the shoes of others. So they're the 4 head-based attributes, and generally people are pretty comfortable with this. And I should mention now, anyone listening can just jump on headheartleader.com, totally free, but I've had 16,000 people complete this scale since January. It's one I built with one of the universities in Australia, and it'll give you a personalised report and a comparison to how you're going on each of these. And same with the heart. So the 4 heart-based attributes are humility, which is all around confident humility, intellectual humility, knowing we don't know all the answers and being quite okay with that. Second is self-awareness, which is obviously understanding that impact that we're having on others. Feedback is a critically important tool there. Third is courage, and that's the courage to speak up for what you believe in, even in the face of pressure not to do so. And the final is empathy, and that's that ability to really understand that your lived experience is not the same as others, and to appreciate that you're going to need diverse points of view to make the best decision that you can.
Okay. So within these 8 attributes, I'd love to hear, are there some particular tools or tactics or practices, things that you've discovered, wow, this little thing makes a world of difference in improving curiosity or perspective or empathy?
Yeah, well, let me share one with you that I first came up with about 10, 12 years ago when I first started sitting on company boards. And I was only 38 then, so I'm 50 now. And I remember feeling really insecure and feeling I needed to contribute to every conversation. And, even though I wasn't adding much value, I felt I needed to say something, sort of prove myself. I think we've all been in that situation. But at the same time, I was noticing that my really experienced colleagues around me barely said anything at all. And, they might only ask a single question, but that question was gold and it would change the course of the conversation. So then I came up with a concept I still use now called the word to wisdom ratio. And I would write back in the day when it was still hard copy papers, WTW on the corner of my page. And it was to remind me that I really needed to be mindful of the impact I was having on those around me. And at that stage, the number of words it was taking me to add any wisdom at all was pretty unhealthy, whereas, my colleagues clearly were doing much better than me. But as I've become more experienced and a more senior leader, what I use it for now is to really make sure I'm not taking up all the space in meetings. So for people listening who do have a team, if you're going into a meeting and you've already got the answer in mind and you sort of are just checking in to make sure they all agree with what you're proposing, then it's likely you're taking up so much space no one else gets an opportunity to contribute. And the word to wisdom ratio is something you can think about in terms of your coaching ability. And I would encourage modern leaders that even if you know the answer, use that opportunity when you've got the time and it's appropriate to really ask good questions of those you lead so they can feel they've come to the answer themselves.
Well, that's a fun one, the word to wisdom ratio. Anything that you'd also put forward in terms of boosting our perspective?
Yeah, like reading a room is, I think we all know, sometimes it's easier to do than others. And sometimes we get it wrong and we really need feedback to calibrate whether or not we've read it correctly. But one of the challenges to reading a room is if you're someone, firstly, who has blinkers on and pretty much thinks you're right all the time, then you're basically the only person in that room. And so that's a problem. So you need to make sure that you've got people around you that are actually giving you dissenting opinions, respectfully, of course, but that you're not surrounding yourself with people who just agree. But I think also around leading with perspective, it's important to be getting feedback and to really understand whether or not your reading of a situation is the same as others. Test that with people because invariably we're not going to get it right. Sadly, our self-awareness is very high. We think about 95% of us think we're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of those we lead would agree. I mean, that's a pretty scary statistic. And that's why feedback's so important.
Okay. And I'm also curious about boosting that self-awareness. If we think we're self-aware, but we're not, well, first, how do we know if we really are? And second, how do we boost that?
Yeah. Well, that is why you need trusted people around you. And you need to sniff out the bad news. I think we invariably like to hear from people that tell us we're doing a good job. We're human. Obviously we love to be reassured, but they're not the people that you actually want to seek feedback from. You also don't want to go to the people who are really critical of you because that's not helpful either. But it's finding those people in your life who know you well enough that they aren't afraid to tell you what they think and that they want you to succeed. So it's given in a way that's there to help you actually do better. And I think if you've got those people in your life, whether they're mentors, colleagues, your boss, someone that's in your team, really thank them and take their feedback with the gratitude because it's a gift. And if you can be doing that for someone else, make sure that you're open to that. I should say that when you're getting feedback, though, curiosity is the most important attribute to bring in to that conversation because we're all going to have triggers. There's 3 triggers we all feel when we get feedback. The first is you think, well, you're an idiot. And so the conversation or the feedback is clouded by your relationship with the person. And you're there, regardless of how valuable the feedback might be, you're thinking, how dare you tell me this? The second trigger we'll have is you're wrong. And you're just thinking, well, I don't agree with your perspective. So you shut down. And that's not helpful either. You need to stay present. Even if you don't agree, it's not a matter of having to change based on the feedback, but you do need to be able to hear it if you want to encourage others to give you feedback again. But the third trigger is something in us, and it's about shame or embarrassment or ego, whatever gets triggered. And I think knowing that that's going on for you and still being able to stay present is one of the most important things leaders can do when they're practicing self-awareness.
Okay. And so zooming out a little bit, one of your key messages in the book is that we need to know when's the right moment to lead with more head style and versus lead more heart style. What are some of your top indicators or telltale signs which tend to nudge you one way or the other?
Oh, that's an impossible question to answer because that's the art. And there'll be situations, I know I've gone into meetings that I think are going to be all about deliverables, pretty much. And I've got my documents or my policies or whatever it is that, you think you're there to do. But in the course of that conversation, you notice things go a little bit off the rails. And suddenly you need a huge amount of humility or empathy, whatever it is, to get that conversation back on track. So I think in any given context, you're going to be mastering this art back and forth. And that's part of the learning process of being a good leader. And we never get it all right. It's not as though you'll ever get to a point in your career where you can say, right, I've mastered that now. And that's okay. That's part of being a modern leader. You're going to have a misstep. But, a modern leader doesn't really fear that so much because they're able to say, oh, I got that wrong. Let's talk about how we can get this back on track. It's freeing to be able to do that.
Understood. So there's no cut and dry, hard and fast rules and algorithm that we can churn down.
Wouldn't that be easy if we did?
Well, I'll just sort of speak from my own experience. Think about in Myers-Briggs language, thinker versus feeler. I am a feeler slightly. And I think there are definitely times where I need to be less accommodating and more hardcore, maybe not ultra hardcore like Elon Musk.
No, don't go that far.
So what might be some indicators that more of a head approach is needed in a given moment?
Do you know, I'm similar to you. And so I'm naturally one who wants to make sure everyone's on board with an idea, and I've consulted and we've all got buy-in. And then I notice there's been times in my career that style, I've used it and it just isn't the right style for the moment. And so I haven't read the room properly. And I think part of being self-aware is that you realize that fairly quickly. You're assessing what's going on, the response to that, whether or not it's timely, because obviously in some situations it just practically takes far too long to be consultative in that way. So there's definitely situations where you need to be adjusting your leadership style in that response, but you're still using these attributes. It's just, think of it like a pendulum. You're sort of moving back and forth as you need to, and really being intentional about the kind of leadership style. That's all this is about. It's about not mindlessly leading one way forever and thinking that that's going to work. And I think that might have worked in the past, where it was pretty consistent at work, that if you were ultra hardcore back in the 80s in some organizations where that was the culture, you could just do that day after day for 20, 30 years, get to the top and then retire. I don't think that is how organizations work now, and it's certainly not how individuals succeed.
Well, maybe instead of talking about broad-based rules, if you could just give us a couple examples in terms of, here's a leadership situation and wow, that really pointed to head would be better versus here's another situation that pointed to heart would be better.
Well, I think a common scenario lots of people find themselves in, especially if you're leading a team, is you've got your team meeting and you sit down, you've got a bit of a plan that you need to come up with, and you're telling everyone what the plan is, and you ask, is there any questions or any feedback? You're trying to do the right thing. And there's silence. And everyone goes, no, that's great. It's fine. And everyone goes back to the meeting. This is a very common situation. In that circumstance, it's easy for a lazy leader, and I'm going to be pretty hard there, to just go, okay, well, no problem. Let's all go do this.
I guess there's no questions. All right.
Yeah, I guess there's no questions. Excellent.
Good news.
I get to go to lunch early. The better leader, a modern leader, I think, would see that as a signal and like, okay, that's something about my leadership is giving the impression that either I don't want to hear questions, I don't want to hear feedback, I'm not curious as to different ways we could do things. I always think leaders need to look at themselves rather than thinking it's the problem of the team. And so in that situation, you can really turn it around, and maybe not in that meeting, but maybe having a second meeting afterwards to go, look, I noticed that in all our team meetings, there's never really any feedback. What am I missing? Is it something about how I'm presenting the information? Is it something about how I'm asking? I'm really keen to know, because I know you guys have got far more to contribute than what you're showing, and I really need your contributions to make the best outcome. So there's different ways you can create a safe environment and try and explore what's going on. And if you ask the right questions in the right tone, you might find that someone brave enough says, actually, well, when I did raise something 3 months ago, you nearly bit my head off, and, I don't want to bring it up again. Now, if someone was to say something like that, the only response you should have as a leader is gratitude, because that person has had so much courage, firstly, to say that. But secondly, you've obviously not even remembered that that was an impact that you had. And remember, at the beginning, I said, I think leadership's just simply a series of moments. And that is a moment that you've missed, and you've got to do a lot of work to rectify. But finding out what's going on is the most important goal.
Well, and it's funny, as I imagine situations where I'm in the room and I have no questions. I mean, sometimes it means I am completely satisfied with the wisdom that I have received. And other times it means, I think this is boring and stupid and lame, and I shouldn't really even be in this meeting in the first place. And I'm hoping this can be over as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say that out loud. If someone really pressed me multiple times one-on-one, I might let them know. But generally it's like, no, I'm not going to go there.
But if you think that, the chances are other people think that meeting is a waste of time, which means leaders need to also be assessing, like, have I asked for feedback on whether these gatherings are even worthwhile? We sit here and you just listen to me for an hour. Is there another way you guys would prefer to work? And you might say, actually, I'd rather do all this stuff asynchronously, because I don't want to have to come in and or even get online and have these meetings. I can be doing something else. But why don't we? And you've got suggestion A, B, and C. If I'm prepared to hear that, it's much more likely others in the team are going to have suggestions. And suddenly you come up with an agreed way that you're going to move forward. And you will be, as a leader, getting feedback. Now, it might be that I've always thought it was better in a face-to-face meeting. And suddenly when you're asynchronous, you're giving endless feedback in a document. That's something as a leader I need to get my head around.
Absolutely. And it seems like, I guess this is sort of next level humility for leaders to realize, this whole initiative or project that we've been embarking upon was really ill-conceived.
Yeah.
It should be shut down and reversed immediately. Oh, good to know.
But as a modern leader goes, okay, well, great.
Yeah.
Better we know this now than later. So now what? And that's when this isn't all about bending to other people's will. It's about saying, okay, I've heard you now. Now we're accountable, because this is an idea as a team we've come up with. What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? Who's delivering what? So this is where that head and heart balance comes. But I don't think you get there unless you're prepared to open your mind to not having all the answers.
All right. Well, tell me, Kirstin, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
Well, I'd love people to take a look at the book. It's just been launched in the US. It's been named in the top 10 best new management books for 2023 by Thinkers 50. So you can find it on Amazon. I'm all over the socials. I love connecting with people. So please find me online and do the headheartleader.com. Go there and I'd love to hear how you go with the scale.
All righty. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
That is so hard. But I think the best advice I've ever been given that I give others, and perhaps I can sort of do it that way, is to just say yes to opportunities as they come along. Even though I'm guaranteed that you're likely to think you're not ready for them, say yes anyway, because you just never know what other opportunities will come from them. And that's certainly advice I've followed throughout my career.
All right. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
There's one in my book that I'm currently loving, which is a guy who wanted to get better at chess. And this is back in the 60s. And he did an experiment with chess grandmasters and amateurs to see if chess grandmasters just had better memory. And it turns out, no, they can read a board. And it's anyone who's watched the Queen's Gambit and seen her look at the ceiling and all the chess pieces move, that is perspective. They read the room or read the board really well. But you can read more about the study in the book.
Oh, yeah. No, I think I've heard of this, in that if pieces are just randomly placed on the board, the Grandmaster has no better memory than your average Joe.
That's exactly right.
As opposed to they go, oh, wow, so that bishop is putting that king in check right now. And so then he's going to have to, it means something to them, like the configurations.
It does. So his name was Adrian de Groot. And yes, he initially just put the pieces in a position on the chessboard. So the amateurs couldn't remember where they were, but the grandmasters easily, because they must have looked at it and gone, oh, that's the Queen's Gambit. And so they could put it back. But when he randomly mixed them up, as you said, they were no better than the amateurs. Not sure that it made old Adrian a better chess player, but he did learn about how they can read a board.
And a favorite book?
Well, I've just picked up Elon Musk's biography as well because I went and heard Walter Isaacson speak. So I'm midway through that, but I'm also reading the new book by Michael Lewis on Sam Bankman-Fried. So I obviously have a penchant for reading about questionable business people at the moment. I love reading about different types of leaders.
All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
I like the app Calm. So it's got good soundscape stories, helps me get to sleep. I love having a good night's sleep. So I think every leader needs to sleep well.
All right. And could you share a favorite habit, something you do that helps you be awesome at your job?
I walk my dog. I live on the beach in Australia, which is, pretty tough, I can assure you. We've got a 10-mile beach in front of our house, and I definitely try to walk my dog when I'm at home every day. That helps me just center myself and remember what's important.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
Yes, to remember that everyone's a leader and that leadership is simply a series of moments, and every moment is an opportunity for you to leave a positive impact in your wake.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Yeah, go to my website, kirstinferguson.com or headheartleader.com, or you can find me on the socials.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, have a look in the mirror first. So as much as we can easily point out all of those leaders around us who are doing a bad job, it's much more important that we're considering how we're going and get feedback and just work on it every single day.
All right. Kirstin, this has been a treat. I wish you much luck and good head and heart moments.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate how Kirstin came back to feedback again and again. In fact, the word feedback appeared 22 times in the transcript, and how so often that feedback loop process is broken and we just don't know what's up. 95% of us think we're self-aware, but only about 10 to 15% of those we lead would agree. Whoa, that's spooky. A powerful reminder to be continually seeking that feedback, asking for it, encouraging it, not getting defensive and unpleasant. When folks give it, they say, oh, never mind, this is not safe to do. But to really be continually getting after that so you don't fall into the self-awareness gap, but rather you know what's up and people respect and appreciate you for having asked, and you're making the right modifications and efforts you need to continue to be all the more effective day in, day out. So big thanks to Kirstin. Again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are found at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP912. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.